Oktober 19, 1945, Auschwitz-Birkenau. The acrid smoke from the crematoriums hangs low over the muddy roll call square, choking the gray morning sky. Prisoner 119,104 stands shivering in the freezing slush. He has been stripped naked, shaved bald, and robbed of his life's work, a scientific manuscript hidden in his coat lining. Everything the textbooks say about the human breaking point is being tested against the ultimate machine of death. But while the SS guards can strip his clothes, they cannot touch the dangerous, revolutionary concept forming in his mind, an idea that will rewrite survival. The architecture of Auschwitz was not merely brick and barbed wire, it was a scientifically calibrated machine designed for one specific purpose: the systematic demolition of the human soul. In the polished lecture halls of Vienna, the great professors, the experts with their PhDs, had confidently mapped the human mind. Their theories were useless here. The established dogma, preached from the safety of the ivory tower, insisted that human life was driven by the pleasure principle, or the will to power. The academic elite argued that when stripped of civilization, man is nothing more than a beast, reacting only to hunger, pain, and instinct. But the textbooks had never smelled burning flesh. The bureaucratic architects of the final solution relied on this predictable collapse. They believed that by removing every physical comfort, they could extinguish the will to live. The untouchable powers of the camp administration held all the cards. They controlled the calories, the sleep, and the very air the prisoners breathed. According to the logic of the powerful, a starving, freezing man has no capacity for the future. He is a dead man walking. To the experts, searching for meaning in a slaughterhouse wasn't just impossible, it was a delusion. Into this mechanized slaughterhouse stepped prisoner 119,104. Viktor Frankl was not a hero. He was a nobody. Before the war, he was a neurologist in Vienna, a man of credentials and status. But here, stripped of his diploma, his suit, and his name, he was nothing more than a number, assigned to dig ditches in the frozen earth. He was a starving, lice-infested skeleton, indistinguishable from the thousands of other doomed souls shuffling toward the gas chambers. But Frankl possessed a weapon that the SS guards could not confiscate during the strip search. He had the trained eye of a clinician. While other prisoners focused entirely on the gnawing pain in their bellies, Frankl began to observe a terrifying anomaly, a data point that defied every medical textbook he had ever studied. The experts said survival was biological. The established medical consensus, the titans of physiology, dictated that the strongest men, those with the most muscle mass and the deepest fat reserves, would survive the longest. It was a simple, cold equation of calories in versus calories out. The SS doctors believed it. The prisoners believed it. The equation was wrong. Frankl watched in horror as the strong men, the laborers, the physical specimens, often collapsed and died within weeks. Their bodies didn't fail first. Their minds did. Conversely, he saw the weak, the intellectuals, the sensitive, the physically frail, surviving month after month of torture. Frankl realized the experts had missed the single most critical variable in the human operating system, the future. This was the forbidden insight, in a place where the average life expectancy was less than 3 months, suggesting that a prisoner should focus on a future goal sounded like insanity. It was reckless optimism. The wise old prisoners, the hardened cynics, preached a different gospel. Keep your head down, eat your crust, and don't think. Thinking was dangerous. Hope was torture. To hope for a future that might never come was considered a recipe for madness. But Frankl began to identify a specific, lethal pathology. He called it the Give-up-itis. He could predict with terrifying accuracy exactly when a man was going to die, sometimes 48 hours in advance. It always started with a cigarette. In the camp economy, cigarettes were currency. You traded them for soup. You traded them for shoelaces. You only smoked them yourself if you had given up on living. The moment Frankl saw a prisoner smoking his own ration, inhaling the toxic smoke with a vacant stare, he knew that man was gone. The battery had died. The prisoner would lie in his own filth. No amount of beating, screaming, or threatening by the guards could move him. The survival instinct and that holy grail of the biological experts had simply vanished. Frankl realized that he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. But testing this theory was dangerous. To speak of meaning in the barracks was to invite ridicule or a beating. The bureaucracy of despair was absolute. One evening, the power failed in the barracks. In the pitch black, surrounded by the groans of dying men, the cynicism of the camp threatened to swallow them all. A senior block warden, usually a hard man, asked Frankl to speak. This was the moment of truth. Frankl stood in the dark, a shivering skeleton addressing a room of skeptics. He had to fight the crushing weight of nihilism. He didn't offer them bread. He had none. He didn't promise liberation. He didn't know when it would come. Instead, he offered them a crazy, insane shift in perspective. He told them that life was still expecting something from them. The experts outside the wire believed these men were done, but Frankl argued that their suffering was not meaningless. It was a task. He told the man weeping for his lost book that the book was still waiting to be written. He told the father that his child, hiding in a foreign land, was still waiting for him. He told the scientist that the truth was waiting to be discovered. He reversed the question. It did not matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. The titans of psychology said that under pressure, the human psyche regresses. Frankl argued the opposite, that under maximum pressure, the human spirit can transcend. He was proposing a psychological revolution from the bottom of a latrine pit. He tested this on himself. When the typhus fever hit him, when his temperature spiked to 104 degrees and he was hallucinating in the delirious darkness, the experts would say he should have died. His body was consuming itself. He refused to succumb to the biology. Instead, he forced his mind into the future. In his fever dreams, he wasn't lying in filth. He was standing at a podium in a warm, well-lit lecture hall in Vienna. He was wearing a crisp suit. He was lecturing a rapt audience on the psychology of the concentration camp. He projected himself through time. By treating his current torture as mere data for a future lecture, he detached himself from the pain. He turned his suffering into an object of study. The impossible happened. The fever broke. The frail doctor survived where the strong laborers perished. But the ultimate test of his radical theory came with a friend, a well-known composer in the camp. This man confided in Frankl that he had a dream. A voice had told him that they would be liberated on March 30th. The man anchored his entire existence to that date. The experts might call this hope. Frankl called it a ticking time bomb. As March 30th approached, the news from the front lines was bad. The camp was not going to be liberated. March 29th arrived. The composer suddenly fell ill. On March 30th, the day the prophecy failed, he became delirious. On March 31st, he was dead. To the camp doctors, the cause of death was typhus. Frankl knew the truth. The cause of death was a broken promise. The man's immunity had collapsed the moment his future goal evaporated. This was the undeniable proof. The connection between the mind and the immune system was not just a theory. It was a lethal reality. The experts who treated only the body were failing. Frankl, the unlikely hero working in secret, realized that to save the body, he had to hack the soul. He had discovered the cure for the incurable. While the SS machinery worked to strip them of humanity, Frankl and a small group of dissenters began to practice this tragic optimism. They stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "Who is waiting for me?" They defied the bureaucracy of death not with guns, but with a mental projected image of a future that the Nazis could not see, could not touch, and could not kill. April 27, 1945. The gates open. The statistics of the Holocaust are a blur of zeros, a numbing calculation of industrial murder. But for the specific transport that brought Viktor Frankl to the camps, the math was terrifyingly precise. The experts had calculated a survival rate of less than 1 in 28. By all conventional metrics, calories consumed, muscle mass lost, exposure to typhus, prisoner 119,104 should have been a corpse in a mass grave. The masters of physiology had deemed his survival impossible. He was a skeleton. He had lost his wife, his parents, and his brother. but the data defied the biology. As the Allied troops moved through the barracks, they found the survivors, and among them was a shocking statistical anomaly. The men who walked out weren't necessarily the ones who started with the strongest biceps or the warmest coats. They were the ones who had held on to a specific image of the future. The weak had outlived the strong because their minds had hacked their immune systems. Frankl didn't just survive, he vindicated his radical insight with the ultimate proof of concept. He had reconstructed his confiscated manuscript on scraps of stolen paper, scribbling in the dark, forcing his brain to focus on logic rather than hunger. The text became his lifeline. The bureaucracy of death had failed to account for the human spirit. Frankl proved that the will to meaning was not a luxury for the wealthy. It was the primary drive of human existence. The madness of hoping in a hopeless place was actually the most rational, survival-critical action a human being could take. The impossible was achieved not by fighting the guards, but by fighting the nihilism in his own mind. The war ended, and the unlikely hero returned to Vienna. There was no parade. There was only silence. He discovered that his pregnant wife, Tilly, had been murdered in Bergen-Belsen. The theory faced its final, brutal test. A lesser man would have followed the expert's prediction and collapsed into despair. Instead, Frankl went to work. In a 9-day burst of manic energy, he wrote down the lessons of the camps. He intended to publish it anonymously, to remain the quiet hero. He called it Man's Search for Meaning. He went back to his clinic, back to listening to patients, back to obscurity. But the radical thought exploded. The book sold millions of copies. It became the manual for anyone facing the impossible, from addiction to grief to trauma. He showed the world that forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except one thing: your freedom to choose how you will respond. He turned his tragedy into a triumph. Viktor Frankl died in 1997, not as prisoner 119-104, but as the man who taught the world that even in the deepest darkness we have the power to turn on the light. In a world obsessed with how to survive, how to get rich, how to get fit, how to get ahead, Viktor Frankl remains the ultimate investigator of the why. He proved that the experts in the ivory towers were wrong about the human capacity for resilience. The most powerful weapon in history wasn't a bomb, a tank, or a strategy. It was a simple, stubborn belief that tomorrow matters, and because of him, we know that we are never truly powerless. If you want to uncover more stories of the unlikely heroes who defied the odds and rewrote history from the shadows, make sure to like and subscribe to the Investigator's Archive. The files are waiting.